I'm driving down to the Music Center in Los Angeles to see a play. The play is called Sweat, and it won a Pulitzer Prize in 2017. It's about a bunch of friends who work in a factory in Reading, Pennsylvania. So it's all about the economy and the situation that we're in. By the way, the economy, apparently unemployment is the lowest that it's been in 50 years, and economists are thrilled, leading me to think that economics is not a science, it is a political discipline. If economists can be thrilled about the fact that 50% of Americans are one accident, illness, job loss away from dire poverty, that 50% of Americans don't have $400 in the bank to pay for an emergency, then there's something wrong with that. And it's probably because the Koch brothers are buying entire economics departments in American universities, putting people who have been trained in the Friedrich Hayek School, the Austrian free market economist school of economics, into positions where they're teaching young people who are majoring in economics. Getting back to the crisis of legitimacy, I had to end my stream yesterday early because I was on my way to the doctor's office and it was a very short trip from my house. Well, I was talking about Susan Collins' disgusting performance, and I really didn't spend a lot of time talking about Joe Manchin. So I want to talk a little bit about Joe Manchin today because he is the Democrat. And Chuck Schumer today was speaking, he was pontificating on the floor of the Senate, and quite frankly, I couldn't wait for it to be over. It was like having a tooth pulled. I just wanted them to pull the goddamn tooth out already so I wouldn't have to sit and listen to these stupid self-congratulatory speeches about how the system is working fine and the Senate is this deliberative body and the Constitution is being followed. And Chuck Schumer, I mean, I actually had to tweet this one. He actually thanked Chuck Grassley for how well he led the Judiciary Committee. I mean, that was a disgusting display of leading that Judiciary Committee. I mean, they couldn't even trust themselves, to be fair to Christine Ford, which is why they had the woman prosecutor come in. And they couldn't even let her talk to Kavanaugh because once she started asking questions about that July 1st party, they pulled her right off. Lindsey Graham pulled her right off and used the rest of the hearing to do more pontificating and congratulating of Kavanaugh and what a great guy he was. So for Chuck Schumer to tell Chuck Grassley that thanking him for the way he led those committee proceedings was despicable. And the other thing is Chuck Schumer had signed a deal with Chuck Grassley earlier on this fall, basically agreeing to approve all the lower court nominees. Now, where do you think fucking Brett Kavanaugh came from? He started out on a lower court. And these lower courts are the farm teams for these extreme jurists who are supported by the Federalist Society. So what the fuck did Chuck Schumer think he was doing making this deal with Chuck Grassley? So they're now thinking, okay, and then the other thing is, why couldn't he keep fucking Manchin in line? Excuse me for cursing a lot tonight, but, you know, I'm getting all mad thinking about it again. Because this is just the biggest travesty of justice I've ever seen in my life. You know, I posted today that a lot of people remember where they were when 9/11 happened, but I think, quite frankly, what happened today is the biggest attack on our country, bigger attack on our country than 9/11 because it came from within. It's like a total fascist coup d'etat that just took place here. If they didn't already have control of the highest court of the land, they certainly got it today for decades to come, And the fact that Chuck Schumer couldn't even keep Joe Manchin in line was just goes to show how weak and impotent the Democrats are. Joe Manchin, by the way, faced a primary challenger, Paula Swearengen, who I live streamed when she came to Los Angeles with some other Justice Democrats. And you might not have known, but I did a series on the election, the primaries. Will the real progressive please stand up? And I tried to get her on, but she got sick and had to cancel the night that we were scheduled. But the point of that series was to talk about how the Democratic Party was sabotaging true progressives, like Cara Eastman, who managed to prevail against their endorsed candidate, Brad Ashford, and also Levy Tillerman, who audio taped, I can't remember who it was now, but some guy in the Democratic Party basically telling him to get out of the race. So this is what happens. The Democrats still have not learned from 2016. They still want to push their establishment candidates, and they don't support the progressives that could actually win, like Paula Jean. So it was very unfortunate that she lost that primary. But if they really cared about the Supreme Court, they would think ahead, they would play the long game, they would realize how Joe Manchin is going to be voting on these nominees. Of course, I don't remember at that time if Kennedy had resigned at that point before the primary, but it was sure, everybody knew that there are some very elderly justices and somebody was going to resign. So regardless, it would have been good to support somebody who wasn't a dino. And Joe Manchin is a dino, and everybody knows that about him. Unfortunately, Paula Jean, somebody asked her today if she could have, if we could write her in, and she said she ignored the advice of her supporters who wanted her to run a write-in campaign. Unfortunately, the deadline was September 11th, but you can imagine if she was an official write-in candidate, then the donations would be pouring in. I mean, I was literally watching yesterday when the fund to unseat Susan Collins was about $1.9 million before her little 45-minute disgusting speech that I can't believe I sat through and tweeted, you know, every stupid, false, misleading, rationalizing thing that she said. After, I predicted that that thing would go well over $2 million, and it is. In fact, today I think it's close to $3 million. So you can imagine if they had set up a fund, if Paula Jean were in there and they set up a fund, we could get rid of Manchin in the next month. But such is not the case. I mean, obviously, West Virginians have to vote for him. I mean, we're in this position of, you know, the lesser of two evils all the time. Heidi Heitkamp right now. I just posted something today about how she's in trouble in North Dakota. And then she's not one of my favorite senators because she votes like a dino all the time also. But, you know, problem is she's in a conservative state. So what do? I mean, I think that if she loses, then we got to boycott North Dakota. But who even fucking goes to North Dakota? I mean, I've never been there. I have seen no reason to go to North Dakota. So maybe a boycott wouldn't even work. Maybe the people in North Dakota are the only people that go to North Dakota. And excuse me if you live in North Dakota, it's nothing personal. So I also started to talk about the Women's March organizers and how they were focusing on believing Christine Ford. Now, I think that was a strategic mistake. Yes, it gets a lot of women excited because a lot of women have been assaulted and are not believed. But you have to know the only voices that I heard today in the vote were women's voices. So where are the men? Why aren't the men incensed about this? I mean, the thing is, I think the Ford allegation, while I believe her and, you know, do not question what the Democrats tried to do with getting those allegations investigated. It was a sham investigation, of course. And Jeff Flake is, you know, an idiot also for trying to pretend to everyone that he really is an honest broker and really cares about people. Because if he's smart, he would know that that investigation was not an honest one. It was not a complete one. We had people wanting to come forward and corroborate her story. I mean, I posted an article today about a guy who knew Mark Judge very well, and he seems to think that Mark Judge might have been trying to do the right thing in his crazy way by jumping on the bed to try to, I don't know, end the situation, because he tells this little personal story about how Mark Judge was very kind to him, but he was just a drinker. I mean, he was an alcoholic as a teenager, And it's just unfortunate that as an adult he hasn't grown any courage, and he couldn't come forward and do the right thing, and all the other people are coming forward, but they're having to speak to the media, of course, because the FBI wouldn't interview them, because it was a sham investigation. So I feel like there were so many things wrong with this guy as far as what he was going to do. If you were a worker, if you were a consumer, if you were, concerned about the environment, if you were disabled, if you were a Native American, if you were LGBTQ, whatever you were, if you care about privacy, if you care about surveillance, if you care about this gamble decision, which I haven't even begun to investigate, but it's what people really think is the reason they were pushing to get him on. Apparently it's some way that Trump can indemnify himself from any actions that could be organized by the states. And please, if I'm getting this wrong, don't hold it against me. I'll post an article in the comments. But this is really, I think, what's behind this. And because he is a partisan guy. I mean, everybody knows this. He was the one who was the lawyer for Bush during Bush v. Gore. He was the one vetting all the all the judges, making sure that the most extremist judges would get put forward. I mean, he couldn't have displayed his partisanship more clearly when he talked about this being a vendetta of the Democrats and the Clintons, and then to actually make a threat to say what goes around comes around. I mean, this is just, it's like, they don't make movies like this. I mean, the fact that this is reality and we have to live through this reality, and, what's the matter with women? Everybody's saying vote, vote, vote. Vote is what we need to do, because this is how we show them. We go out in November and we vote them out. Now, this does, many of these senators are not up for re-election. They can't be voted out. And of course, by the next election, everybody will have forgotten and they would have gone on to the new thing. I mean, does anybody remember the Las Vegas shooting? Is anyone talking about the Parkland shooter? I mean, it's just like with the 24-hour news cycle, there's always something new to be outraged about. So that's why it's very important that we continue this outrage and we don't just give up. But I personally don't see that voting is going to save us. I mean, of course we have to vote. I believe in voting, and I think that is the minimum that you have to do as a citizen in a democracy. If you don't vote, you're giving your power up to people who do vote. Which are, wealthy people and corporations who buy elections, and also Republicans. Republicans vote. Now, here's the thing. So I'm watching the live stream of the Ford testimony and the Kavanaugh testimony, and I'm just appalled at how many women are believing him, disbelieving her, repeating all the same talking points. Oh, if she's afraid to fly, how come she flies? Oh, why did she wait to report it for 35 years? Oh, why was she coaching someone on a polygraph? I mean, it's like they read this shit and they just spit it right back out. And I don't know, and I'd love for people to say in the comments what their interpretation of this is. I'm hoping these are just Republican women and not independent women. I'm hoping we can get the independent women to see what a travesty this was and vote them out. They must have Stockholm Syndrome. I mean, because other than that, they're denying their own lived experience. You can't tell me that sexual harassment and sexual assault only happens to Democratic women. So Republican women have had this happen to them. So what do they think? They think, it's okay? Do they think that she made it, that it does happen, but she made it up? That women should just grin and bear it? I mean, what is the thinking of a Republican woman? I mean, if Facebook weren't so damn polarized, I might even be getting some Republican women on this feed telling me, what they think. But unfortunately, this is what I, talked about in part 1 of this video, which is that we're only getting the news that we want to see. We're only seeing the feeds of the friends that we want to see. And there is no national consensus anymore. People are just reading what they want to believe already. So how do we change the hearts and minds? I give Bernie Sanders a lot of credit because I think that he does attempt to go out into Republican states and Republican districts and talk to people. And I do feel that when you talk to people and you take away the labels, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, socialist, communist, when you take all those words away and you just talk about the policies and you just talk about the values, the morality, the underlying issues, I think people agree. I really do think people agree, and Elizabeth Warren, you know, gave a great speech about this. I know I sat next to a Republican evangelical Christian when I was, after 2016, after the election, I was flying out to North Carolina, and he is from Raleigh. And we talked for the whole 5 hours, and I have to say, we agreed on more things than we disagreed when we just talked about, you know, people and family and values and all that sort of thing. So I think that we have to break out of our comfort zone and start talking to people who we don't agree with. And I remember Stacey Patel, this was a post that she made in 2016. She was a Bernie delegate from Florida, and she's involved with the Brevard County Democratic Club Committee. She and her husband Sanjay, who's Indian American, were going to some Trump rally basically to educate people about an environmental issue, a local environmental issue. And he felt very scared to go to this Trump rally, being that he has brown skin. But she writes about the experience as being a generally positive one, because when she was able to just talk about the local issues that everybody in that community was concerned about, she was able to get a lot of support. So that is why I said to somebody today who posted about this big rally tomorrow to stop Kavanaugh, I'm like, hello, did you not see today that they already voted him in? Why are we having a rally tomorrow? You know, that I just think that's a waste of time. That what we need to be doing is supporting local issues where we can all agree, like the rent is too damn high. And in California here, we have Proposition 10, which is going to repeal a very bad rent control law. I mean, I should say a law that interfered with rent control. And we have a measure on the Los Angeles ballot to get a charter, to change the Los Angeles charter so we could have a public bank. So that's a bank that's going to invest in people and services here in Los Angeles, and not like Wall Street banks that, you know, tank the economy with our money and invested in all these exotic financial instruments where they could make money and not invest in the communities that they serve. So here's the thing, if you're going out, and we're really organizing, I mean, all these different groups are working together to organize on these two campaigns, and like DSA and Our Revolution, the other night at my house we had a text banking party for those two measures. And then Gail McLaughlin, of course, who people from California know, ran for lieutenant governor as no party preference. She is organizing the California Progressive Alliance. So we're going to get all these different single issue groups together to work together on these issues, because what happens is, like the two big movements that I was involved in, the Occupy movement and the Bernie Sanders movement, to me were big tent movements because they involved a lot of issues. But what happened was, after Occupy was crushed by, you know, it happened shortly after a conference call with 28 Democratic mayors, I might add, and the Department of Homeland Security. And within a couple of months, almost all of the Occupy encampments were shut down. And the Bernie Sanders campaign, and he got cheated by the Democratic Party. After those campaigns, everybody sort of went back into either their single issue or their single identity organizing, and when we don't work together, we don't win. So personally, I think we need two things. On this federal level and on the international level, we need a lot of nonviolent mass civil disobedience, or as my friend Natalie Williams says, we need a general strike. I mean, people just need to shut shit down right now in order for it to be any change on that level. But on the local level, I think we need to organize, and we need to get our local candidates in and our local campaigns passed, because I think that government is less corrupted. I'm not saying there's no corruption. Obviously, in Los Angeles, the developers, the real estate developers, have a lot of influence over politicians. But people, individuals also can interact with their politicians a lot easier on the local level than they can on the federal level. So I'm kind of proposing a two-part solution here. I think we need to, and I don't know that the Women's March is the one to lead it. I mean, yes, they got a lot of people out in the streets, you know, after Donald Trump's election, and yes, they got a lot of people down to DC, but you see that their focus is so identity politics oriented. You know, this is more than just about women. As I said, this is about workers, it's about consumers, it's about the environment, it's about the disabled, it's about all the people that don't have power in this country. So we can't just make it about believing women, which is not to say that we shouldn't be fighting that fight also. I mean, what this confirmation hearing showed, and someone put it really well, it was very sad, is that this country just hates women. And I really think they do. And the problem is a lot of women hate women. And I think that has to do with porn culture. I mean, you see a lot of women objectifying themselves to appeal to men as sex objects. And this is, and including millennial feminists. They really do. And you know, this is not my kind of feminism, my second wave feminism back in the 70s. I mean, the kind of ways that people, you know, the profile pictures that they post and the Instagram photos that they post, they're just hypersexualized, and they're turning themselves into boy toys, and then they have to wonder why, you know, we have rape culture. Now, not to say we didn't have rape culture before. In the 70s, in college, I was organizing Take Back the Night marches. We had rape. We had plenty of rape. But right now, what we have is porn culture, that pornography that is violent, you know, degrading, more than just objectifying and dehumanizing, which it has always been. Now it's actually violent and degrading, and it's available for 8- and 9-year-olds to watch easily by going online. And I am not saying that it should be censored. I am all for the First Amendment, but we really do need to get back to having parents and schools provide sex education and not leaving it up to pornography. Because when you leave it up to pornography, this is what results. And sex education needs to be about relationships, emotional intimacy. It needs to be more than just how to make babies and how to prevent making babies, okay? So this is how they teach it in Cuba. Now, you'll notice that in Cuba, they don't have the internet, and I'm sure they want the internet, but because of the embargo, they don't have the internet. Not many people have the internet, that is. And they don't have pornography, and they do teach sex education in school, and they do teach relationships and emotional intimacy. And I was really pleased to see when I was in Cuba in 2014 that men and women actually, and boys and girls actually went, you know, walked down the street holding hands. I don't see that so much anymore. But I digress. I don't really want to talk about that. I made a great video. I show The Robust Opposition. I interviewed Gail Dines, who is the foremost authority. She wrote a book called Pornland. She has an organization called Culture Reframed, because that's really what it takes. It takes talking to parents, talking to schools, talking to young people about this. But it's all of a piece. It's all part of a patriarchy. It's part of capitalism. It's the commodification of women's bodies, the commodification of sexuality. So, I mean, there's so many things we have to change that it becomes overwhelming. So that's why I'm going to close this video and just say that I think we have to focus locally. There was a great book that I read in college called Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher, and I have it out to read again because I think that when we can make something smaller and more manageable, we can conceive of it better, we have ownership of it better. We just need to get out there and work, you know, with our neighbors on these things, and we need to get offline. I do think that social media is great. I also use it for organizing, for, you know, promoting my events, for live streaming, for doing my show. I am not going to knock social media, but we've got to get offline sometimes and actually go and talk to our neighbors face to face, and especially our Republican neighbors, if we have any, and just see if we can start to turn things around. Because quite frankly, people who know me know that I'm very pessimistic about the bigger picture. I really don't see that we have the political will to do what it's going to take to stop catastrophic climate change in time. Humans are not going to be on this planet at the end of the century, which is bad, you know, for young people who are watching this, because I don't want, you know, you to feel hopeless and helpless. But people say to me, well, Lauren, you know, if you feel that way, then, you know, why don't you just party for the rest of your life? Why do you do what you do? And my answer is always, well, at the end of my days, when I'm lying on my deathbed, all I am responsible for is my own life. And I want to be able to say that my life had purpose and meaning and that I did all I could. So it's about the journey. It's about the effort. Don't focus on the goal. I mean, yeah, focus on the goal when it's local and short term, like, you know, repealing Costa-Hawkins and getting a public bank in LA. But I don't know, I feel like I'm all over the place in this live stream, but I really did want to say that the Democrats suck, and which is not to say I don't support my people here in California who are trying to take over the Democratic Party and make it more progressive. In Occupy, we talked about diversity of tactics. I think the tactics are all good. Everybody should do whatever they can, whatever they enjoy doing, because if you don't enjoy doing it, you're not going to do it. And my final piece of advice is cut it out with the circular firing squad, okay? For all of you people that are trying to tear down Jimmy Dore, he's one of the best that we have, okay? He is a progressive with a heart of gold. Like Bernie, everything he does is coming from a place of compassion. And because he had this meltdown with Francesca Fiorentini, for which he apologized, he made a very gracious apology, but that wasn't good enough for Shane Bauer. No, he had to gild the lily and go after him even more. You know, we need to be forgiving. Everybody's always posting these articles about self-care for activists. You need to understand that Jimmy Dore has been under attack by Shane Bauer, by Sam Cedar, by David Pakman, by all these people calling him an Assad apologist, calling him a Putin apologist, calling him a useful idiot. And, you know, he's one of the best we have. He understands what the real issues are, and he uses his show as a platform for progressives. He's had me on there once talking about my arrest for the Poor People's Campaign when I was live streaming that, and they targeted me just because I was live streaming it. And he's had Maria Estrada on and other progressive candidates. So, look, we need to be allowed to fuck up once in a while, and we need to be forgiving of ourselves. Now, let's not forgive the assholes. Let's not forgive Chuck Grassley and Chuck Schumer and Brett Kavanaugh, okay? But, you know, let's cut it out with the circular firing squad. You will next see me on this page tomorrow afternoon at 5 p.m. Pacific time, where I will be interviewing Abby Martin and Mike Preisner, who is her partner in life and in her show, about the Empire Files and all the wonderful things that she has done to bring us the information that the corporate mainstream media are not bringing us. So until tomorrow, keep fighting.